Because if you're extremely good, you usually leave. And if you're extremely bad, you usually get kicked out. If you're going to leave, you should leave in the first 5 years, because getting a job that pays the same when you've been at McKinsey for 10 years is really hard. They don't give a shit what Bain is doing. McKinsey. They spend half the town hall telling you why they're not worse than McKinsey.
What did you learn from that?
Like, they pick good people and then they don't really do anything.
When did you start thinking about leaving McKinsey?
About 5 years before I got into McKinsey.
Do you have any advice you would like to share?
Just try something. We don't have unlimited pools of cash. I would start a pet care brand in Saudi. You know why it's booming?
Why?
Because millennials are not having kids, and so as a replacement, to make their lives less empty and hollow, they're getting pets.
Oh.
That's the...
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the AI Best Business Show, the show where you'll best learn about business, entrepreneurship, tech. Today with me, I have a special guest, Philip. He's the founder of
Opontia.
Yeah, I keep on practicing, but I miss it every time. We're going to speak about the e-commerce, state of e-commerce in the region, why did he start it, and different aspects of it. Philip, everyone has this dream of, okay, I'm going to get a job at McKinsey, be set for life. But you decided to leave McKinsey and start your own thing. Before I get to what you started, I want to get a feel of, because everyone wants to take a look at what's inside McKinsey. Oh, what are the people like? What's the culture like? What does it teach you? If you could take us through this experience you had at McKinsey.
Sure, though I would just push back. I think almost nobody has the ambition to join McKinsey and never leave. I think lots of people have the ambition to spend 2 years at McKinsey and leave. Yeah, there's many depressed partners at McKinsey who wish they'd left. But go on.
No, go ahead. No, I was gonna ask, like, what's the experience like? Why is it different than other places? Like, why is, like, people who are graduates that want to get into the job work look at McKinsey or other big firms as the firms to go to?
Yeah, I would say it's a bit similar to. So the actual work you do at McKinsey is not that much different from many job. Like, I mean, BCG and Bain I would put in the same bucket. Same, general consulting in general, I'd say is roughly similar. I would say there is a difference between number one and number two, and McKinsey's number one on like every metric. So, in terms of revenues and the projects they work on and how many people they have and the resources they have and the fees they charge client and all this stuff. So the difference between number one and number two is not that usually massive. When you look at the numbers, like I think BCG is probably similar revenue now, it's similar this, that, and the other. But most getting off from both McKinsey and BCG pick McKinsey,
Okay.
Which means, I mean, actually, it still doesn't mean that much in terms of like the caliber of the people. They're all roughly the same. But the big difference is the stories internally that they tell themselves. And I know this because I was at Bain for a bit. So the difference between a meeting at Bain and a meeting at McKinsey is at Bain, they spend half the meeting like a town hall. They spend half the town hall telling you why they're not worse than McKinsey. And then they go into the rest of the meeting. Whereas at McKinsey, they don't give a shit what Bain is doing.
They get
McKinsey.
Okay.
They think they're the shit. So, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but
you're feel free to do so.
So it's a difference of mentality being number one versus the like number 2, 3, 4. You're not like sitting there wishing you're number one. You can sort of do your own thing. That gives you some freedom and flexibility, I guess. And also in interactions with clients, because clients know that, I think they presume that you know what you're talking about more than they would otherwise. Okay. And also there's no threat. You can't be threatened at McKinsey that they're going to fire you and hire somebody else. Whereas at BCG, the constant threat that clients would use all the time is, we'll fire you and hire McKinsey. Okay. Whereas at McKinsey, they never say, we'll fire you and hire Bain. I never heard that said once. So that makes a big difference because you don't feel this constant like underdog, like pressure to yeah.
What did you learn from that experience? Like what did you get out of this experience over there? Learning how to deal with clients. Is there something special you got out of this experience before you left?
Yeah. So there's two types of institutions as defined by Malcolm Gladwell. Like one type of institution is like the US Marines, it's like a boot camp. And the second type of institution is like a modeling agency. And the reason I use those two analogies is a boot camp, they have the same outcome, which is they have like an elite group of people at the end of it. But the difference is a modeling agency picks you on the way in, and a boot camp or like the Marines train you, take basically anybody and train you up to being amazing. So I would say most elite education is more like a modeling agency. Like they pick good people and then they don't really do anything. Like in Harvard, I don't think I learned a huge amount while I was there. I would say McKinsey is somewhat of a combination of the both. So yes, they do pick good people, but at the same time, it's like bloody hard work when you're there. So it is like long hours and you're like cranking Excel and PowerPoint and then doing a lot of high level pitches and presentations and all this stuff. So yeah, you do learn problem solving skills and just the general like business, like how to do, like how to have executive presence and all this stuff. But then what you get at the end of it is, well, you get like the fact that you've learned that stuff, but you also get this like amazing network and this brand and this presumption that you're capable, regardless of whether you are or not. And that helps massively when it comes to fundraising.
Okay.
So I'd say that the two things you get are like the brand and prestige, which is what you get kind of from a modeling agency type setup, like with Harvard. But you also then get like actual skills that you learn, which is what you get from the boot camp type Marines situation.
You left that. Why did you leave McKinsey? Like when did you start thinking about leaving McKinsey and starting your own venture?
I started thinking about leaving McKinsey and starting my own venture about 5 years before I got into McKinsey. So I knew exactly why I was going to McKinsey, which was to spend 2 years there. So I was quite deliberate. I Googled which companies produce the most unicorn founders. Number one was Google. And number two, well, no, there's maybe like Hewlett Packard and one other, but they all have about 300,000 employees. If you look which company per employee produces the most unicorn founders, by a country mile, it's McKinsey. Like the Kareem founders were McKinsey. Like everybody you can think of is like ex-McKinsey. So I was very deliberate in thinking, well, you don't need to go to McKinsey to found a unicorn, but your chances of doing so increase fairly significantly after if you do. It looks like, I don't know, maybe it doesn't, but like it looks like something in the water there. So I want to go like find out what that thing in the water is. So yeah, I knew I was going to quit after 2 years. I just wanted to. Also, yeah, when I was interviewing for business school, one of the alumni from Stanford that interviewed me, I didn't get into Stanford in the end, by the way, but one of the guys that interviewed me was he had graduated his MBA, spent McKinsey, and then founded a unicorn. And I was like, right, that's the path. That's the path. But honestly, the people that end up making it to partner are basically average people, in my opinion, at McKinsey. Because if you're extremely good, you usually leave, and if you're extremely bad, you usually get kicked out. And so, if you to make it through to partner, you're basically like run, in the middle somewhere. They're the people who are really risk averse, like like when people say consultants are risk averse, they mean the people that end up staying through till partner. And there's so many of them that are so depressed and burnt out and wish they'd left. But by the time you get to partner, you don't really have any proper leadership management experience. So getting a job that pays the same when you've been at McKinsey for 10 years is really hard. So then like, if you're going to leave, you should leave in the first 5 years, because that's when you're not going to take a massive like pay cut to go somewhere else.
Did you know what you're going to start before you started, or did the idea start forming with the experience you got? Like,
no. I knew a week before I resigned from McKinsey what the idea was going to be.
Okay. And tell me more. You have a co-founder, which is Manfred, right? How was the conversation? How was the conversation? Like, who came up with the idea? Who approached the other?
So it was me. I basically got funding before I met Manfred. I'd been having some conversations with some VCs about this. I got staffed on an e-commerce project at McKinsey. It was like creating the e-commerce war room, they called it, during COVID, to rapidly assess the ability for these offline retailers to go online because they were getting screwed by the lockdowns. And then I read about this Thrasio model, and I started having some conversations with some VCs, and I basically got funding, but they were like, look, you're not an e-commerce guy. You also need an e-commerce guy. Like, you can do the funding and acquisition stuff, and then we need somebody else. And then a friend put me in touch with Manfred, and that's how we got going. Because he's like the hardcore e-commerce guru.
Okay, so you kind of came with the funding, the business side of it, and he was the e-commerce side of it, the understanding of e-commerce more.
Yeah, exactly.
Why did you choose the MENA region specifically to work on? Why not like you work in the MENA region, Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
Why did you choose that region instead of other regions, maybe Europe or even the US?
I mean, to be frank, it's because I was based in Dubai. So the business, I mean, as with most successful business models in MENA, they usually are some adaptation of a business model that's worked quite well in the US or Europe already. So like Careem was just an adaptation of Uber, and Angami was an adaptation of Spotify, essentially. And we're an adaptation of the Thrasio model, they call it, which is like a big US one. So if we tried to raise funding to do it in Europe and the US, they'd have been like, you're 2 years too late, like this is never going to fly. But because we could see that it was working there, we were the first to raise to do the model in MENA, and that was like a massive advantage. Like, yeah.
And what is Optini? I keep on saying it wrong.
Opontia.
What is Opontia?
Opontia is you'd call it. Well, I'll tell you what we do. We buy and grow e-commerce brands. So when I say e-commerce brands, I don't mean marketplaces like Amazon and Noon. I mean usually small independent sellers who are importing, say, kitchenware from China. They put a bit of a brand on it. Then they're selling through e-commerce channels, so through Amazon and Noon, and maybe on their own Shopify website. Let's say they're doing $1 million in revenue, a few $100K of profit per year. We come along, we say, if they're interested to exit the business, and usually they've got to a size where they don't love scaling, doing logistics and operations and customer service and all the like more tedious things that come with running a large business. They're quite passionate about their product, and they kind of want to start a new brand maybe, or do something else. So we give them some upfront cash to buy the brand off them. We then scale it using all of our resources, geographically and different channels, etc. And then we give them some share in the growth of the profit of the brand over the following couple of years. So it's a really attractive, proposition for many sellers in the region. I'd say what differentiates us slightly is we have a super strong focus on brand management and brand building. Rather than, I wouldn't call this in any way some kind of private equity financial play. This is very much, we're trying to build a house of brands that can, customers love, more like an online P&G, you might call it, than any kind of financial play.
Okay. Let's go. I want to kind of get to understand the process of how you look at brands. But before that, what is the state of e-commerce now in the region? Like, if we look at the state of e-commerce from a top level view, where are we now in the MENA region? Is it are we ahead? Do we still have a long way to go? What's the state of e-commerce now from your view?
Accelerating rapidly, but with a long way to go for sure. I mean, it's probably the fastest growing e-commerce market in the world. Maybe besides sort of sub-Saharan Africa, maybe. But I think now we're looking at like, I don't want to say the numbers because it doesn't really make a difference, but or it's quite hard to put into context. But 5% of the total retail sales are now through online channels in MENA. In the US and Western Europe, that's more like 25%, and in China, that's more like 50%. Okay. So you can see where it's going. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take to get there. The main challenges are there's a very fragmented marketplace ecosystem. So it's not like Amazon in the US where it takes 60-70% of all e-commerce sales. Like Amazon here takes 15-20%. And then geographically, the fragment and regulatory, it's very fragmented. So selling in Saudi is impossible, without a Saudi entity. So it's not like, if you set up in UAE, you can start selling in Saudi. You can't. You have to set up in Saudi as well. Same in Turkey, same everywhere.
Let's say you set up in the US, would you be able to sell in these countries much easier, or do you have to have an entity in each country?
You can sell cross-border, like a bit like you can order. There are sites in the US that allow you to order from US sites and have it delivered in Saudi. But the delivery fees are just absurd.
No, what I was mainly speaking about, all your operations are based in the region, but you as an entity, you are a US entity. Would that be easier in terms of regulations?
Oh, I mean, we're not a US entity, but no, it wouldn't. It would be much more complex.
Okay. How can we overcome these challenges? What can we do to take up these challenges and make this rapid growth happen better in the region?
There's a lot of push being done now on regulatory reform, particularly in UAE and Saudi, and that's definitely helpful. Particularly in the UAE, you don't now need to have a local partner, 51% local owner. In Saudi, yeah, there's different versions, but you still need certain exemptions to have a foreign-owned trading company in Saudi. So regulation is one thing. One thing this region is doing very well is the funding ecosystem. So it's actually not too hard to raise money in the Middle East right now compared to certainly some other places. Yeah, I'd say the regulation is the main.
Okay. Take me through the process of, how do you find, what's your criteria of a brand you want to purchase? How do you approach a seller? How do you close a deal? Just the whole funnel of you finding a brand, the criteria, okay, that's a good brand I want to buy, I want to add to my portfolio. How do you approach selling? What's the deal like? And then how do you add it to your portfolio of brands?
So it's exactly like a sales funnel if you've ever done like hardcore sales. So we start with a long list at the top of the funnel of like 500,000 sellers. This is just like a list of all e-commerce websites in the Middle East and all sellers on marketplaces. We then have a fairly manual process of filtering those, like using freelancers, etc. Then we get 15,000 high potential leads, which our business development team reaches out to, and then that's just a matter of calling them or messaging them, etc. If they're interested in what we offer, then we sign an NDA, then they give us their information. If in 2 weeks we analyze that, see if it's something we'd want to buy, and then we give them a term sheet at the end of that. In terms of what we look to buy, so it usually has to have at least $500,000 profit. $500,000 a year revenue with $100,000 profit, so 20% profit margin in all categories except for fast fashion and consumer electronics, and not either. So usually things like home and living, cosmetics, toys, kids and baby, these types of categories.
How many you have you're looking at brands that are still really early in the growth phase, is that true?
Yes.
I mean, is that for a specific reason, or is do you why did you choose this minimum? Because 100,000, I guess a lot of people could get to 100,000 in profit. Why did you choose that low minimum barrier?
Probably that number's a bit higher now, to be honest. We chose it because to buy the brands, you need to raise cash, and we don't have unlimited pools of cash. So we had to start with smallish brands. The biggest brand we bought so far we paid $2.5 million for it. So it was doing, it was doing a certain amount of profit.
You buy these brands. What's your kind of strategy after that? Do you keep each entity working by itself, or do you then have a set back office for all the entities and kind of integrate them together? What's kind of your play after you buy one brand?
Yeah, it's more the second one. So usually it's one founder, and they're usually looking to exit. So they might stay on for 3 to 6 months to help us with the integration, but after that, then our team takes over. So almost everybody that works for us is doing brand related things. So brand management, product development and design, logistics, sourcing, pricing, customer service. Like this is our core competency. So this is what our people do.
Okay, so you kind of build the, so you're basically buying brands with no team that achieves a certain revenue, and then once you buy the brand, you're building the team for that brand and scaling it.
Yes, I mean ideally we're not adding too much headcount for the brand, but yeah.
No, but you're not adding too much because you have the original team. So the team you kind of hired is managing all the different portfolio of brands. You have it's like a cloud, basically a cloud kitchen kind of model where you have one kitchen, but you're selling. Okay.
Yes.
What are the industries you've seen that
actually us and Kitopia are an extremely similar business model. So cloud kitchen is a good analogy.
Okay. What are the industries that are your favorite in the region? You're like, okay, these industries are still early, but they have a huge potential to penetrate the market in the MENA region, like from trends you're seeing from different brands that are starting.
Yeah. The three that we're building clusters around now are the ones I mentioned. So health and beauty or cosmetics, home and living, and toys, kids and baby. But we also just bought a pet brand recently. I think the pet category has a huge way to go. So yeah.
I want to go back a little bit to the integration part. Do you find it difficult to integrate all these different brands together? What are your challenges over there in terms whether it's either logistics or warehouses or the financials of these brands, integrating them to your to Opontia? Where is the hardship over there? What are your bottlenecks, your challenges?
At this point, I should just acknowledge that I am not really the expert in the company on this topic. My role is more on acquisitions, fundraising,
Okay.
etc. But the main pain points are, so firstly, you have to move the stock from their old warehouse to the new warehouse. But that, I mean, to be honest, it's fairly smooth. If it's one brand owner, getting them from their setup to ours is fairly smooth because we have our own logistics partners and providers. So doing that is okay. Taking over the sourcing is okay on day one because we just sign the same contracts they had with their suppliers. Then we usually try and optimize. So we try and find cheaper supplies if we can. And then integrating the financials, we have like a data warehouse team that integrates financials. But if they're selling through platforms that we already know, in Turkey, Trendyol and Hepsiburada, or here on Salah or Amazon and Noon, then we already have the setup to integrate their financials. So yeah, I mean, within a month we can usually integrate. The main problem will come, and it's coming now with the large brands. So the last brand we bought, we're taking on 5 to 10 employees as well. So then it's about getting their SOPs and processes aligned with ours, particularly on things product development. They probably know much more than we do. So yeah.
You raised a bunch of money. What's your end goal? Is the end goal to kind of stay in the game as much as possible and keep on generating profit? Is your end goal to maybe for an entity and sell to a private equity or kind of go maybe an IPO? What's the end goal of Opontia?
Opontia.
Opontia.
So do you know where the word Opontia comes from? Maybe this will help you remember it.
Okay.
There's a cactus called an Opuntia cactus.
Okay.
And it's the most common cactus in the world, and the common name for it is a prickly pear. So it's the one that has like the bunny ears. So if you can remember the word Opuntia cactus, then just change the U for an O, Opontia. We have these little cactuses all around our offices. Yeah. So yeah, what was the question again?
What is your end goal? Like a lot of founders
end goal is the first one. So we plan to be around for a long time. So we want to stay in the game, build a profitable cash generating business that is a house of brands that customers love. A sort of a Pontia standard of e-commerce in the region is what we're going for. And at some point we might IPO that. But that's the idea.
You mentioned something at the beginning that raising money in the region is easy. Why do you think it's easier than raising money in the US or in Europe? Is there more capital in the region, or what's the reason about it? Because we've seen funding get less and less in the past in the last year. Is that the same in the region, or are you seeing different trends?
Yeah. No, I want to clarify. I don't think raising money is easy, and it's particularly not easy now. It's just slightly less negatively impacted than the rest of the world has been. And the reason for that primarily is the high oil price, to be honest.
Okay.
So there is just still money available here for people to invest. But it's still really hard. You have to have good metrics. Nobody's going to give you cash without having a good business.
You have to go in with a solid business. You have to know your numbers. You have to have a good story, and you'll be able to raise money. These are a little bit more fun questions. Let's say you were to start an e-com brand, or in what country would you choose to start that e-com brand in the region? Would it be Turkey, Saudi, UAE, Egypt, and what industry would you choose, or what product would you sell?
I would start a pet care brand in Saudi.
Okay, wow. Is it really booming that much, like the pet industry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's booming. I know pets are not super traditionally a Saudi thing as well, but even that's booming.
Okay, wow. Let's say it wasn't a business in e-commerce. What other businesses?
You know why it's booming?
Why?
Because millennials are not having kids, or they're having kids at way lower rates than their parents did. And so, as a replacement, to make their lives less empty and hollow, they're getting pets.
Oh, that's an interesting insight.
Yeah.
I mean, because
quite depressing.
The MENA region is always known as family and having children and having this large families. That's changing.
Like the family structure is still way larger here than the rest of the world.
Right.
But you only need a small decline to see a huge, like, 500% growth in pet ownership.
Okay. Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because the pet ownership base is quite small. Anyway.
No, that's a really interesting insight. Outside from this world you're in, what other like business idea you think, okay, if I go an IPO right now and I want to head to my next journey, what's a like business or a pain point you see out in them that's I'm gonna go and solve this problem?
I don't have a very good like specific one, but I would definitely I think the amount of cash that's going to be generated from generative AI is enormous. And if you can even just get yourself associated with a business that's doing anything in generative AI, it's probably a good bet. Okay.
Philip, it was really a great talk. Learned a lot about how your view, what you're thinking. Do you have any advice you would like to share for anyone who's getting into the e-commerce space or in the region or getting into that space? What would you advise founders or e-commerce entrepreneurs?
E-commerce entrepreneurs, I'd say try and build a proper brand. There's so many resellers and distributors and drop shipping and all this stuff. It doesn't take that to build a proper brand, or it's not that much of an extension of doing drop shipping to put a brand on it. So just try something. Maybe it won't work, maybe it will, but it's way more valuable if you own the IP and you own the brand than it is if you don't. So I'd say that's super valuable to build a brand.
Okay. Again, it was a great episode. Where could people follow what you're doing? If any e-commerce entrepreneur that has a brand wants to sell, where should they go? How could people find more of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can go on our website. We have a form to fill out if you want to sell your business. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.